Hello everyone, this is Brenton DeFlitch back here again with tiered responses in the RTI or Response to Intervention framework. In the previous videos, we looked at the holistic model of the tiered pyramid. We also, in the previous video, looked at tier 2 and what that includes and entails. In this video, we're going to specifically look at tier 3. Go ahead and jump in. As always, remember you can email me at bdeflitch@gmail.com if you have questions, concerns, additional information, or looking for advice and input as well. Just feel free to reach out to me. We're now on our third question here with the big questions. We've looked at what is the overall model. We've looked at tier 2, place and movement between, and we're going to look at students within tier 3, briefly talking about placing and moving between the tiers. And again, we're just getting a good, strong, basic, fundamental overview of these elements. So tier 3, let's jump in. Still working with the same display here of our MTSS system, looking more so at the academic supports, the RTI, and down in tier 3. So if you remember, at the beginning of the year in September, we're going to give our universal screener, which is our diagnostic assessment. If everything else in the school is working and functioning as it should, then roughly 3 to 5% of the students should be listed in those results as significantly below grade level. This group of students goes one step further beyond being at risk and become, our warning students. That these are the students that without very specific, very intense interventions, that they will continue to be significantly off track, and either they won't be able to graduate on time, or they will need significant summer school additional programs in order to make up those time and credits, as well as just not having that culture of being able to succeed and to really tackle anything that comes their way. So let's dig into kind of like what that means with some larger key points over here. So first, this is going to focus on transferable and foundational skills. So rather than looking at the standard and the embedded skills like in tier 2, tier 3 focuses on the very basics of each of the elements. So if we're talking about writing tier 3, what we're going to be looking at are, words correct per minute. How many words can a student write per minute that are correct? That is a foundational skill that you need before you look at any of the other more complex standards on any grade level. Some do like to think that tier 3 can work if you go to that specific grade level. So for 9th grade, we give the universal screener. We see that students in tier 3 are actually on a 5th grade level. We go to 5th grade standards. And to some, that works, and they have seen results with that. The biggest results come to implementing and looking at the transferable and foundational skills embedded within those. Also, the type of instruction shifts. It uses more of the EDI model, which you're going to specifically look at, instructing, modeling, and then you start following that, I do, we do, y'all do, and then you do, in that kind of process of slow, gradual release of instruction, and it's very methodical. Now, because, again, that these are research-based and evidence-based materials, you're most likely implementing proven programs. It is very hard and difficult to find a tier 3 system that works, that's going to have that evidence, that's going to have that research backing, that doesn't include a more robust system to purchase and put into place. Additionally, also one of the things that makes tier 3 more of a complexity is that it becomes more individualized and differentiated. You might have 3, maybe 5 students in a tier 1 group, and with that, they all might be on different levels at different times. So as a teacher, you're going to require more training within the model and the specific program that your school is implementing, but knowing that each of those students is going to need more targeted at their level to be able to grow at a fast enough rate to close their individual gap. Now over here on this side, some of the features are similar, but just a little bit different than tier 2. Tier 3 is going to meet for approximately 60 minutes a day for 5 days a week, and again, this being the smallest of the groups, because we again have kind of like filtered through most of the students the population, you're getting just those students that need the most amount of help, then that means that in Tier 3, students need to be with one teacher in the smallest group possible. So these usually are 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, depending on your state and then depending on your grade level. In the high school, there's often more students allowed within the RTI room. As you get to the lower grades, less students are in the room. Then, progress monitoring should happen every week. Sometimes they actually say smaller, where it actually happens at the end of a specific cycle within your program. And this is where, when you implement a program that kind of comes together, that calendaring is much easier because it's specific sequencing of on this date, this time, this is how long you're instructing, this day for this time, this is how long you're modeling, for this day for this time, this is how long they're practicing, and then it says on this date, this time, this is when you're giving your progress monitoring tool. And again, the key here is that you're getting data that is easily, able to be charted and easily able to be tracked to determine if that student is growing at the rate they need to in order to close their gap. The idea here also is focusing on the transferable and foundational skills is that some research has shown that if these students, regardless of the grade, work on these transferable and foundational skills, then the standards will actually accelerate as well as they attain and master some of these more transferable skills. So how does a student get placed? So the first one is most likely the universal screener at the beginning of the year will identify your Tier 3 students based upon signaling that they are probably 3, 4, or more grade levels behind. Then you're going to cycle through your universal screener multiple times, where you'll give it again probably in the winter and then again at the end of spring, beginning of summer, depending on your school year. Any one of those can help designate students for Tier 3, but usually the biggest two would be one, at the very beginning of the year, and two, connected to Tier 2. If a student, after several weeks and including the full 6 to 8 weeks of their time in Tier 2, is unresponsive, meaning that their chart, when you're looking at their data, levels out because they're stagnant or that their gap is growing, they're unresponsive to the interventions in Tier 2. So the data team most likely at that point will recommend for those students to move into Tier 3. And then they'll receive more intensive intervention services. The third one is kind of a different point, and it's one to not forget, is that we often have so many transient students that you want to make sure that students entering your school or entering your room have received a universal screener, whether it's results from that previous school or it's administering your school's universal screener to make sure that that student doesn't come into the school year late and then isn't able to receive services in a timely manner to help them get back on track with being on, at, or above grade level. So if you're in Tier 3, students go through, 8, maybe 16 weeks of instruction, you're collecting the data, and then you look at the trend line and your data team meets and goes, okay, what are we to do with those 3 to 5 students? You look at them on an individual case-by-case basis, and you start to determine, as we stated in the last video, should the students remain in Tier 3 because they're showing moderate growth, or they're stagnant, meaning we still haven't quite reached them yet, or they can remain, or that they could move into Tier 2, meaning that they have now accelerated at such a rate that they are roughly within 1 to 2 grade levels behind and should be working on standards and those embedded skills. And then third, some people do like to include moving from Tier 3 to Tier 1, but essentially if your system is working as it should, those students should not have been identified for Tier 3 to begin with in the first place. So generally, while you can take a universal screener and go into any of the tiers, once you're in Tier 3, you should probably move back through the tiered system so that you're still receiving some supports throughout. The last one, which really changes by definition in each state, is that if the gap is widening or it has been an extended period of time and the student has not shown any growth in Tier 3, where do they go next? And the point of this is often defined as Tier 4, and Tier 4 is usually special education with an IEP. So all of this data collected in this downward support ends up moving towards the identification meeting to determine if the student has a disability or exceptionality and is in need of an IEP to then receive the services that they need to become functioning at above grade level for them. And that is, there's a lot of politics behind it, but generally it's a helping to identify those elements. And you can find more information about that connection in the blogs that are going to be posted on the Grade Network. So that's going to be it for Tier 3. Thank you for joining me. I hope for some of you this helped get some basic information and jump into the world of RTI and intervention.